This is the Watchman, giving another clarion call to the Brotherhood. This week, I wanted to draw attention to something very big that's occurring regarding Russia. And no, it's not all those sub-zero temperatures, frigid ice storms you're experiencing. Although the CIA is trying their best to blame Russia for even the bad weather through the weather manipulation memes they're floating around. No, despite the CIA's best attempts to make us all think that they really belong on the front pages of National Enquirer and Star Magazine, this video is about something far more serious for folks around the world. I'm not talking about big weather news. I'm talking about big news for digital banking, more specifically, international wire transfers. Now, our Shield brothers are a pretty astute bunch. So many of you already probably know, but just in case some listeners don't, I'll give a little bit of background. The modern banking system is really dependent upon moving large sums of cash instantly to anyone, anywhere in the world. That's really what makes the entire Ponzi that they're running tick. Basically a mechanism to seemingly beam up currency in a sort of cash without borders system. The system that makes these wire transfers possible almost instantaneously is called the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, or SWIFT for short. SWIFT is the most important and crucial banking and financial tool that virtually almost no one's ever heard of. Really, the only folks who know about SWIFT or talk about that SWIFT moniker are either those who either already work in banking or those who are in our stacking circles and read the real news regularly. But lately that's been changing a bit because SWIFT is in the news a lot these days. Now, I'll explain why, but first, a little more background. SWIFT is located near Brussels in Belgium. It was begun in 1973, just after the gold window was closed, and about the same time that the oil embargo and petrodollar began. A lot was happening at that moment in history. Its original intent was to give a reliable medium for financial and commercial enterprises to send and receive fast, orderly currency transfers. Large financial institutions are basically all a part of the SWIFT network, and most of the transfers, called messages, are sent from one bank to another. If any bank or country wants to get involved with this telegraphic wire transfer system, all they really have to do is buy the SWIFT software and apply to obtain what's called a business identifier code, or SWIFT code. Any country or central bank can also obtain their own unique SWIFT code, allowing them to send and receive as much capital as possible at all times, regardless of their politics, because fortunately SWIFT is a neutral global enterprise that doesn't care about that sort of thing at all, right? That's wrong. Dead wrong, unfortunately and sadly, because something went terribly wrong after the September 11th attacks in the U.S. Let me tell you what happened. Beginning in around 2006, the U.S. government passed basically a bill that no one's ever heard of, called the Terrorist Finance Tracking Program. Now, under this new statute, the feds basically gave themselves a blank check to look under every nook and cranny around the world for terrorism, including the SWIFT mechanism. Right, since that time, they've pressured the EU and SWIFT on numerous occasions to disclose intra-EU and US transfer data, under the pretext, of course, of fighting the bad guys, which the EU actually rejected in session at one point. They actually rejected it in EU Parliament to give, in cooperation, this information to the feds, because they knew that there was one country in particular the US wanted to go after, and that was Iran. Okay, the elites in D.C. wanted to wage economic war on Iran and wreck their country through sanctions as well, but the linchpin that made the whole thing come together in an unprecedented way was using SWIFT as a weapon. They actually petitioned SWIFT to step in and delete the SWIFT codes of every major bank in Iran, including its central bank. And at the time, SWIFT told them to take a hike. And Washington was so enraged when SWIFT told them that in February of 2012, the U.S. Senate Banking Committee actually brought sanctions against SWIFT itself for failing to instantly bow the knee to D.C., whom, as we all know, believe themselves to be emperor of the entire universe. Shortly after those sanctions and pressures, SWIFT did cave, and they deleted all the major banking codes in Iran from their system. It hit Iran really hard. I mean, it truly was a huge blow. Due to their banks and citizens not being able to send or receive wire transfers, it basically put them in a depression. The red line of SWIFT neutrality had been crossed. Right? After all, anyone who will tell you, in any sort of relationship, whether it's a marriage or just a significant other, if there is an abusive significant other, if there's an abusive party that crosses that line and strikes the other person, that's not the last time they'll do it, is it? Once that line has psychologically been crossed, they'll do it again and again and again. In bending SWIFT to its will, D.C. had gotten away with financial terrorism. They would now be able to use SWIFT as a political weapon anytime they wanted. No country on earth was safe. Something had to be done. Enter Russia. Russia, of course, is the new core power behind the global movement to ditch dollars and the criminal government and bank which issues them. For the last several years, there have been threats, especially from the UK government, that they would bring sanctions from DC against Russia, culminating in deleting the SWIFT codes for Russian banks and financial institutions from the SWIFT system. This is extraordinary. All right. Now, whether or not many pundits took these threats seriously, I tell you what, Russia surely did. They said that such an act would be a declaration of not economic war, but war. All right? And for the voices in Beijing and the Kremlin ever since have grown louder and louder, not only for a US dollar alternative, everyone knows we need that, but for a SWIFT alternative as well, because these days, SWIFT and the dollar go together like peanut butter and jelly. It's the main tool the bankers use to move dollars and other currencies of the like all over the world instantly. Now, this is important because this week comes the new headline that the counter-SWIFT system that Russia and China have been working on is almost ready for prime time. In fact, the report linked under this vid's description said that nearly 100 of Russian credit institutions have already connected to the Russian wire transfer system. Now, this system will allow any and all Russian banks to receive ongoing communications and messages with the Russian central bank directly. Now, before you get too excited, remember, 100 institutions is a good start, but it's only a start, okay? Because Russia still has over 600 institutions linked to SWIFT. SWIFT is still the major game in town. All right, let's be honest. Russia is still tied, unfortunately, to it at the hip. In fact, last year, Russia's SWIFT usage was at its all-time high. Today, Russia still sends, even with the imminent threat of SWIFT deletion, they're still sending over 360,000 wire transfers per day. But please take heart. Remember, Russia and China have known for years the Western bankers are behind the wars, behind NATO, behind the UN, behind troublemaking groups like the CIA, and they had the foresight to see many years ago that one day the banks would stop pretending to be neutral and would use these banking instruments, just like SWIFT, as a deadly political and economic weapon to kowtow nations into submission. Now, Russia and China know the score. All right, they've been creating the SWIFT alternative, this doppelganger, and they've done this all the while dumping U.S. treasuries. All right. I mean, incidentally, this week also the data came out that Russia's U.S. Treasury reserves are now at the lowest level they've been at since June of 2008. All right, since the financial crisis. And China keeps dumping our treasuries too, all while they swap out the debt from the world's biggest global bankrupt hegemon and turn it into glistening, glittering piles of the world's biggest gold reserves. So the joke's really on the Fed. The joke's really on the West. Brothers, the truth is that both SWIFT and the US dollar are dead men walking, though they may hobble along a little longer, so that more finishing touches can be placed upon the system and more strings be placed into this new wire transfer system. The wretched, bloody chapter of destruction that the Western banking monopolies have written is going to finally meet its well-deserved end. Now, when that happens, don't be shocked and don't be dismayed. It won't be the beginning of the end, but the end of a brand new beginning for us all. This is the Watchman, signing out. Stay vigilant and bring the fight to them.